Hello and welcome to our video about unwrapping power standards. This is the first video in the series which will give you an overview of the entire process and an in-depth look at the first step. So as we begin, it is likely there are a couple of questions we're all having. First question would be, what does unwrapping standards even mean? And the second question, why is this important? We're going to take the second question first. Why is it an important process for your PLC to engage in unwrapping a power standard? A couple of reasons. It allows all of your PLC members to have the same picture of what students should know and be able to do. And that clear picture helps us to develop clear and shared expectations for student learning. Most of you know one of my favorite quotes is, "The most dangerous thing about communication is the illusion that it has taken place." A similar quote that would work in this situation is, "The most dangerous thing about learning targets is the illusion that everyone knows exactly what they mean." And let's take a look at an example to help us illustrate this point. The example we're going to use to illustrate the entire unwrapping process comes from driver's ed. We use this example because we figure that everyone has a knowledge base, since most of us drive, and it's not in anybody's content, so we can all kind of share this example and think through it together. So our power standard is that the student will understand how to adapt his and her driving techniques to the road conditions, both in the classroom and when driving. Now I can imagine a group of driver's ed teachers sitting around saying, "Yep, that seems pretty clear to us." But on further examination, they might have to do some discussing about these questions. So what does understand mean? What does it look like when a kid shows you they understand this standard? What does skillfully look like? What would be good enough for a student to meet the standard? What knowledge does a kid need to do this? Which driving techniques? What road conditions? And what are the key skills they have to develop in order to be able to do that adaptation called for in the standard? And so we want to clarify those questions, and that's something that the unwrapping process will do for us. So as we get further into looking at exactly what's involved with unwrapping a power standard, there's a quote that many of you have seen before, but it applies to this situation perfectly. One of my favorite historical figures, Abraham Lincoln, said, "If I have 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'd spend the first 4 hours sharpening the axe." Taking our time and really focusing to make sure everyone is clear about what the power standard entails through the unwrapping process will save us all a lot of time and energy later on as we develop formative assessments. So now it's time to get to our first question that we had about this information. What is the unwrapping process? And put simply, it's a procedure used to help a PLC achieve a common vision of a power standard so that everyone truly is on the same page and understands what we're looking for from the kids. It is similar to the deconstruction process that many PLCs have used in the past. However, it is more specific and clear about the learning targets and expectations for kids. So it should be even more effective than the deconstruction process when it comes to helping us think through which formatives we want to give and how those will look. There are some key points to make sure everybody knows about this process. First of all, you do not, repeat not, need to unwrap all of the standards for your course. That would be incredibly time consuming and wouldn't be all that helpful, so you do not need to unwrap all of the different standards. You will need to unwrap the power standard that your PLC will assess formatively during first semester. So we're talking about walking through this unwrapping process with just the one power standard that your PLC will focus on during first semester. There is no one right way to do this. In terms of organization or format, there might be some different ways to think through the process. And so you need to know that the only important criteria is to make sure that everyone in the PLC ends up with a shared and clear picture of what the power standard would look like in action with real-life kids. So enough about the process. What does it look like? The unwrapping process has 5 steps. The first step involves focusing in on keywords within the standard itself. The second step involves mapping out some of the key content and learning expectations of the standard. The third step involves analyzing the targets and making sure we're clear. The fourth step involves determining big ideas. And the fifth step is to establish guiding questions to be answered in your instruction. And you will have a video that walks you through each one of the steps. This video will finish up by just looking at the first step of focusing in on keywords. So by focusing on keywords, there are a few steps to really make sure we're digging into the power standard to make sure we're clear on what it means. You would circle the words that depict skills, Underline words that indicate knowledge or concepts that kids have to learn, and put brackets around any context information that is contained within the power standard. So we're going to return to our example power standard, and we're going to show how this works. So we need to circle skills or verbs that the kids would have to do in order to meet the power standard. So as I look at this standard, I'm going to circle understand, and I'm going to circle adapt, because those are two key things the kid has to do in order to achieve the power standard. Next, I'm going to underline key knowledge or concepts that the kid has to know in order to be able to meet the power standard. So as I look at the standard, it seems to be driving techniques would be an important piece of information for the kids to have, along with knowing about different road conditions. And last but not least, I'm going to put brackets around contexts, places where this would occur. And as I look at the standard, it would occur both in the classroom portion of a driver's ed class, along with being able to apply that knowledge when driving. So, as you complete step 1, you will at least circle key verbs or skills that the kids have to master in order to hit the standard, and you will also underline at least key knowledge and concepts that the kids have to know in order to be able to, again, meet the standard. You may or may not end up bracketing anything. It's only if your power standard has a context embedded within it that you would do that. Once you've completed step 1, pat yourself on the back, and then please move on and view the Unwrapping Step 2 video to continue with the unwrapping process. Thank you.